I didn't check, so no one can comment. Well, they're not watching it live, so we're just putting the link in for later. You know, they're doing something, hi Model UN people, they're doing something Model Unish right now. So, you know, yeah, I do need to check that for those people that want to check in live, like how to fix the comments so that they just show up without them being moderated first. But, all right, so free response tomorrow. In the stream in Google Classroom, the post, remember the little birdie already told you what's on there, right? So just go back and look at that. That was sometime last week I posted, you know, that little birdie and all the things for the Unit 6 free response, okay? That means multiple choices on Wednesday. Okay. And then good news is that we don't have a unit test for Unit 10 because midterm. So at least we're not trying to squeeze another one in before break. Yes?
Are you watching the video?
Oh, no. Well, time permitting. How about that? Time permitting, we will watch the Bandura video. We did not have time, mods 1, 2, but that's also because we had a fire drill. So, yeah. So good. Yeah. Bandura for mod 30 is in Classroom if we don't get to it today. So, yeah, we'll watch it. Okay. So mod 29, right, is talking about critique. It's on the back of 28, right? Yours is blue. Mine's just the original. Critiques of classical conditioning, critiques of operant conditioning. Okay, so let's just review. We did Garcia Friday, and this is great for objective number 10, right? Here's all the famous people in this unit. Know them. Here's a bunch of them on one sheet for you. All right, so Garcia, remember, is the guy that discovered taste aversion. Okay, and he is the one that said classical conditioning has biological constraints. Remember our example, like about taste aversion, that only took you one time to learn that, right? One time you got sick and now you'll never eat food X again, right? One time. That's pretty amazing. Most things in life you don't learn the first time.
Can we like also treat the taste aversion to like if you eat something once and you're like, I just don't like this, and then you never try it again?
Well, that's a different thing.
Yeah, I don't know, but because I think that with that, I think you could be conditioned to do it. Do you know what I mean? Like I think about my own kid, like she like it's barely touched her tongue and she's like spitting it out. Like I hate this. It's like hold on. Like the rule at our house is you have to try it at least as many times as you are old. So like you have 7 more times to try it before you can say you don't like it. So just try, you know, to condition. Yeah.
So would that help? Is that part of like the psychological, cultural approach?
Yeah. So like the biopsychosocial approach, classical conditioning is all biology. And Garcia was like, yeah, that's a problem. It doesn't explain a lot of other forms of learning. And the key there is that taste aversions prove that things that have a biological connection are learned more quickly or better than stuff that doesn't have a biological connection. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think about, like, coming to school. Like, classical conditioning doesn't explain why you show up every day. And somebody's like, yes, it does. I'm like, how? Well, because if you don't come to school, then you don't get a diploma. And if you don't get a diploma, then you don't get a job. And if you don't get a job, then you won't have food. Food is the unconditioned stimulus, right? Paired with the not coming. Do you see how many steps that took? No, right? Like things that have a biological constraint can be explained through classical conditioning. Other stuff, not so much. So that's Garcia's critique. Like it's cool in explaining things related to your survival. That's about it. Okay. Rescorla and Wagner. Okay. Cognition is involved in classical conditioning. So they actually did some research in classical conditioning to support. It's not purely just a reaction to your environment. Like you like legitimately have a say in it, like a cognitive say in it. So let me give you an example. Their theory is called contingency theory. Okay, contingency theory is what it was called. Okay, and contingency theory is saying that the strength of the CS depends on the likelihood that it's still paired with the US. Okay, the strength of the CS depends on or is contingent on, that's why it's called contingency theory, okay, the likelihood that it's still paired with a US. Okay, so basically that explains extinction, right? Extinction was when a learned response goes away. Why does it go away? Well, if I taught my dog to sit using positive reinforcement would be operant, sorry. If I use the unconditioned stimulus of food, there we go, right? And have them associate the sound of sit with food, then eventually that response of putting their butt down, right, comes with the word itself. Well, if I stop giving food with the command, extinction, right, eventually it goes away. So Rescorla and Wagner are like, well, why does that happen? Like, there's got to be some cognition or thinking involved. And the behaviorists hated that. They're like, no one thinks. We just react. We're just, biological creatures reacting to our environment. And they're like, no, actually not. So here's my, super depressing example, okay? Let's say I bring a gun to class, a track starter pistol, right? So it's not going to be harming anyone. Being recorded. Yeah, bringing a gun to school. Let's see how long it takes somebody to accost me. All right. If I bring a starter pistol and fire it in the air, you're going to jump. The unconditioned stimulus of a loud noise is the unconditioned response of jumping. I pair it with the gun. You begin to associate that starter pistol with jumping. So then I do it a couple of days, and then the next day I go to bring it out. What will you do? Yeah. You're going to jump before I've even shot right into the air.
Like the no button.
Yeah, right? Like the easy button video, right? Remember that one? Okay. We could have just used that example. That would have been less violent.
It's okay.
Hold on, we'll do that one. We'll do that one again. So if I just played sounds of gunshots firing without it being paired with the gun itself, do you know what I mean? Like, eventually that's not going to make you jump anymore. So how did that happen? It's you thought about it. It's like, well, I've been jumping with other sound. Like, that doesn't scare me as much. Or in the case of Brian, right, the roommate in the easy button video, if David, right, kept shooting him without the pairing with the easy button, eventually the easy button wouldn't jump anymore because he's been shot so many other times. Do you know what I mean? Right? Like, it's not going to lead to that anymore. And so their argument is, if it's contingent on that pairing, then some thought process had to go into that, right? Does that make sense? Yeah, like you are thinking. It's not just a pure reaction to your environment. Okay. So then critiques of operant conditioning. Okay, Breland and Breland and extinctive drift. So their experiment. So the little pigs. The little piggy's picking up a little wooden coin and carrying it to a piggy bank. How cute is that, right? And dropping it in the bank. Well, how did they get them to do that? They used a primary positive reinforcer of food and rewarded the little piggy for dropping the coin in the piggy bank. Eventually, though, the pigs kind of don't do it anymore. They pick up the coin, but then drop it, and they use their little snouts to push it around, even though that takes them longer and delays their reinforcer. So the Brelands called that instinctive drift. They're going to always revert back to biological habits. That's what instinctive drift means, right? They kind of revert back to biological habits. Okay, so whatever you're naturally predisposed to do. So this whole, remember B.F. Skinner and Watson? Remember these guys? They were like, oh, I can train somebody to do anything. The Brelands were like, you probably can, but will that learning last? If you're trying to go against nature, probably not. Instinctive drift. You'll kind of revert back to your natural ways. Yes.
If they would take away the reward, so they're not really they're not really conditioning them anymore, but then reintroduce it, would they relearn it?
Yeah. Yeah, though, and guess what? They'll probably learn it faster the second time around than they did the first time, proving that the learning is still there to some extent. It's a critique of operant conditioning because it's saying that there's biological constraints on operant conditioning too, right? Like in that trying to get something to go against one's biology probably is a lot harder than if you use things that go with it. So I don't know. Maybe that's why food is one of the most common reinforcers used, because you really like, do you know what I mean? It like relies on our biology. Like everyone's like, oh, free food, I'll go to that meeting. Like it's like has something to do with this primal instinct of survival. You'd be like, oh, I don't want to hire movers. I'll offer you all pizza and drinks if you come help move my whole house. Most people are like, yeah, sure, you know, like, right? So yeah, that there's just this. Yeah, that's how you sound. By the way.
Yeah, as we move our houses.
Yeah.
All those houses we live in.
So I don't know. I have a brother who with lots of strapping friends. I never paid for any movers, and all the times I moved like from college to my first apartment to my first house, because I was just like, I'll buy you fast food. They're like, okay. It works.
Okay.
Yep.
I wonder if there's
That's how they sound
boys
too.
are more easily conditioned. with
I know,
food than girls
maybe.
are.
I don't know.
I feel like that's
Okay, Tolman. That is 40 studies review. Latent learning just means learning that remains hidden until it's needed. So remember, he said that learning can remain hidden until you're needed, that you devise these cognitive maps in your head.
With the mice?
Yeah. Okay. So remember, just to quickly review, identical mazes, rat 1 and rat 2. Rat 1 is operantly conditioned to find the end of the maze. So anytime rat 1 made a correct turn, he was reinforced with a treat. Okay. And rat 2, you're in the identical maze. Just explore willy-nilly. After a couple of days, Tolman honestly thought, okay, all the current learning theory that was out there prior to his research would have said rat 1's going to find the end of the maze faster if we time them. Why? Because he's been trained, he's been conditioned, he's been reinforced to find the end. And he found that when you actually put a reward at the end of both mazes, that second rat found the end just as quickly as the first rat. So does learning have to be reinforced for it to happen? Nope. Can you learn just to learn? Yep. Do you even know you know it until you need it? Nope. Right?
So is that
Insert any useless trivia you have ever learned. And then it pops up in some game you're playing, and your friends are like, how do you know that? You're like, I don't know, right?
I have no idea.
I just know it. Yeah.
Is it kind of like when you like, I don't know, I guess an example, like when you're reading a book and the person like gets lost in the woods and suddenly they know how like to survive, even though like they suddenly know like, oh, I need this,
Sure.
this to make a fire, and it's like, okay, but you didn't really think
you didn't
about that ever before.
Exactly.
But you suddenly now know that's
Right.
going to work.
Yeah, because at some point in your past, like you
like watched a survival show.
and you were like, oh, that's interesting.
Or that
And you
know
just
that
like filed it away.
So you're
right?
like, okay, well, we need to find how to make
Yeah.
it burn.
Or every time I think about Tolman, I always think about anytime you've been in the car and you've been lost and you're driving around and then you pass a landmark and all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, I know where we are. I know how to get home.
For me.
You know what I mean? Anytime I'm in downtown Canton, I'm just like, where am I? So then you figure it out. Okay.
It's always something strange, like, oh, the shape of that tree looks like
Yeah,
what
you're-
I remember.
But you remember, right? Nobody
remember
reinforced
that
you to
tree.
do that. Do you see? That is a huge critique of both operant and classical conditioning, if we're honest. That you can learn just by thinking. No one had to train you to do or condition you to learn it at all.
That's all Latin learning, right?
That's all what?
That's all under Latin learning.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
That-
latent learning, yes.
that latent.
Latent is just a fancy word that means hidden. That's all. If something's latent, it's hidden.
That's why latent dreams.
Yeah, like,
The hidden meaning.
right, with Freud, yep. You got it, making those connections. Okay, insight learning. Yeah, I always have a hard time coming up with like a nice definition of insight. It's just that aha moment, like solving a problem when you're not focused on solving the problem. I know that that's not like a very eloquent definition, but you've been in a position of insight before. When you focus so hard, like on something, I don't know, for school, right? And you're like, I can't figure this out. But then you walk away from it, you go do something else. Maybe you fall asleep and you wake up the next morning. You're like, whoa, 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 I know how to fix this.
Oh, so like,
I know how to solve this.
word searches.
Yeah. Like this, like a word.
You could be like looking for another word and
Oh.
find another.
Yeah, you're right. Like you're like, I'll skip this one and go back and sure. Okay, so good example of insight learning. This is why Google as a company gives their employees like 20%, their tech employees, like 20% time. There's 20% of their work week that's not devoted to specific tasks. You're just supposed to, I don't know, play ping pong, take a walk, take a nap, right? Like you do something relaxing. The caveat is that any idea that you come up with or any problem you solve with insight that you share with the company. So some of Google's biggest and like coolest features in some of their apps and extensions were developed just when employees were just like taking a walk on the campus, talking to each other. Yeah, it'd be cool as if our email reminded us that nobody responded back and that maybe we should follow up. Wouldn't it be nice if the email just like told you like, hey, so-and-so didn't respond to this email. It's been 3 days. You want to follow up with them, which the new version, right? The new version of Google has that, right?
That's really interesting.
Yeah. And so then, so then they just kind of start brainstorming and coming up with like cool ideas that if you're sitting in a situation where you're forced to, it probably doesn't come to you. Like, so there you go.
It's like when you go to the doctors and they're like, hey, do you mind peeing in this nose? Now you're thinking about peeing when you can't pee.
I don't know if that's exactly an insight, but okay, right? So just think anytime you solve a problem, like not when you're not focused on it. So the key here is this: conditioning theories don't explain that kind of learning or problem solving. That's why it's a critique of both of them, technically. In your book, it was under critiques of operant conditioning, but it's really a critique of operant and classical.
So,
Like the behaviorists cannot answer any of this cognitive stuff that's happening on this sheet. They can't explain latent learning. They can't explain insight learning. They can't explain intrinsic motivation. They can't explain internal locus of control. They can't. That's all psychological, and they don't like that, right? Because it's not biologically like behavior explained. It's not observable, measurable.
Biological science explains.
Yeah, they don't like it. Yes.
So is the reason insight learning is a critique is because it's not being reinforced, the behavior coming up. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, that reason it's critiqued is nothing's being reinforced. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm not being positively or negatively reinforced when I'm asleep, but yet my brain thought of the answer and I woke up and had the answer. So there you go. That's pretty cool. Okay. So yeah. All right. Intrinsic motivation, okay, is an internal drive to learn, right? You have an internal drive to learn.
Does everyone have?
Absolutely.
You just have to find your thing.
Okay. Yeah, that is absolutely right. Like everyone has an internal drive to learn. It's just about what do you have a passion towards or an interest in? I'm going to acknowledge to you that this is a critique of operant conditioning because public education has probably beaten that out of you to the most extent, right? And it's because we've operantly conditioned you to death from the time you were little, right? Like I think about reading, and I honestly cringe anytime Charlotte brings home some reading minute log, a forced reading minute. I'm like, oh, you wanna know how to kill the love of reading out of a kid? Force them to do it and document how often they do it and require that they do X number of minutes every day or every week or every month. So
See, my mom made that easy. She just lied on it. She just said, read the book when read stuff and I'll write stuff.
yeah, right. And so we
That's what my mom
kind of do the same thing. Actually, this year I said I'm not going to lie on it. It's optional this year, and like we're not going to lie. I don't want you to get the prize if you didn't really meet the thing.
Yeah.
But I'm just like, do you like to read? Yeah. I'm like, do you want to do this competition? No. Okay. And she still reads. We're just not like, you have to do this for 15 minutes a day or you won't get your Subway gift card. Like, Who cares? You know what I mean?
She drives herself to Subway.
Right. Yeah.
My 10-year-old daughter.
For a
Yeah.
$5 gift
Using
card.
food again. That's
Yeah.
just the point.
Yeah. Using food again, right? Raven.
For me, I think my biggest thing, like my mom homeschooled me during those like ages when you had those like reading things, and I read way more than I think I ever would have. Because I remember starting public school and having reading laws. I was like, this is stupid. Like this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. But I think like it really is like that.
Yeah,
It really
so-
is like that.
So we get to the point where you're now in high school and you have teachers that say things like, well, if I don't give points for this, they won't do it. And to some extent, they may be right in that, you've been like, how many points is this worth? Does it go in the grade book? Like how much will it affect? And then you sit and weigh the pros and cons of doing it or not doing it. Thorndike's law of effect. Do the pros outweigh the cons? If yes, I'll do it. If not, I'm not doing it, no matter how many points. Doing it, right? Like, it'd have to be worth more points to make it worth it. Or do you see? And so then it becomes more of what hoops do I have to jump through to achieve this extrinsic reward of a grade instead of learning for the sake of learning. So that's the product. There are a lot of, don't feel bad, there are a lot of good modern educational psychological theorists out there that are trying to like reverse that trend. And so like I'm thinking it's baby steps. But like in the regular psych elective, they do projects after each chapter. And so a project choice is always pick your own, pick your own, pick your own. If you hate all of these options, then tell me, related to this topic in psych, what interests you? And come up with, what do you want to do? You want to do research paper? You want to do a presentation? What do you want to do? Go learn what you want to learn related to this topic. So that's like, in Montessori schools are structured that way as well. So it's not, that's just a big critique, right? That intrinsic motivation is decreased when you're in an environment that constantly reinforces. And intrinsic motivation actually can be the key to more learning. So we have to find ways to decrease operant conditioning and increase or help you rediscover your intrinsic motivation. Yeah.
I read about this study once, and I couldn't tell you where I saw it, but it was about this group, and they took a group of first graders, ones that had already been in school once, and for the entire year, they gave them the option. They said, you don't have to go to school every day if you don't want to. So at first, like, none of them went to school, and then they were like, we're just, like, curious. Of course, they're first graders, so it's, like, different than we are. But by the end of the year, they were all going to school every single day just because of the internal desire to learn that we have. That once they were given the opportunity and once they realized that they were missing out on things.
And another great example that I just heard on NPR on the way to school last week is, I forget which state it was in. I can look it up and link it in class or in the article. But a state that they did, it must have been California. I think it was Stanford that did the research. They have a big psychology department. But they looked at perfect attendance awards and how they actually decrease attendance. And they decrease attendance because the minute we give you an award for perfect attendance, we're acknowledging that you are the exception, not the rule. So then people are like, well, if I'm getting a certificate for this, like, that must mean my classmates hardly ever come to school. And then people started like decreasing the amount that they came versus just like setting out the expectation. We want you to be here every day. We hope you can. We understand that sometimes you're sick and we're not going to just give you a reward for doing what we hope you'll do.
Yeah.
More people
like,
came
if
to
you
school
miss
when
one
you were
day,
just
you're
like,
well, it doesn't matter
ask
if I miss
people to
another.
come versus like, you won't get this certificate if you don't, like
Fine.
most of the time, right? People are just like, no thanks. Okay, let's finish internal versus external locus of control. 40 studies review, that's Rotter, okay? Which one do you think is better for learning? Let's answer that first. Internal locus of control. People that feel stressed right now. I know you're not going to like hearing this. I understand. Okay? But a lot of times when we are under stress, and the stress is a lot of these like school things, okay? if you stop and think to yourself, self, who made this schedule for me this year? Right.
I know it is.
Look in the mirror, right? Now, I know this sounds strange, but if you were the architect of it and it's not fate making all this stuff happen to you, it really does shift your focus on stress. You know what I mean? You're like, well, this sucks, but I knew it was going to. Here we go. I'm just going to dig in and do it. Versus like, oh my gosh, all this stuff is happening to me. Why is it happening to me? It's like, well, no, like,
You did it to yourself?
yeah, a lot of times we do it to ourselves. So that can help decrease stress. So most of the time, Roger is talked about in the stress unit. So why is that a critique of operant conditioning? That intrinsic locus or internal locus of control decreases stress, it increases motivation.
Because operant learning is based on external control.
Yeah, operant conditioning is based on external locus of control, right? You're doing it for a reward, or you're doing it to avoid a punishment or avoid a negative reinforcer. That's a lot of times why we feel like it's happening to us. You know, right? Versus you having control. And so again, so operant conditioning kills intrinsic motivation. Operant conditioning also like takes away a lot of that internal locus of control. So you know what? Like maybe it's not so great. That help? Okay. I'm gonna turn off the live stream and watch the Bandura video. Okay.